I, 28, organized a surprise birthday party for my stepmom Clara, 50 female, a few days ago, and it did not end well. She got married to my dad, 55 male, a year ago, and it was a huge surprise for all of us. My brother, 25 male, and I were completely blindsided by his announcement, but tried our best to be happy for him. My bio mom, 53 female, wasn't happy about it at all since Clara used to be a friend of hers up until a few years ago. So for my dad to be getting married to her was a huge deal for her, and she was very upset, but we managed to console her somehow. My brother and I tried our best to be nice to Clara, but she didn't take those efforts seriously. Nothing about her is genuine, and I just can't stand her. She makes fun of us when we're among people, and always makes it a point to compare me and my brother to her kids. Her kids are both doctors, and she's very proud of that. I'm an event organizer, and my brother's a graphic designer, but I guess none of those jobs are noble or well-paying enough, so it's just not good enough. Sina liaved nomumbus. She also doesn't like me in particular, and always has some comment to make about how I've gained weight, or maybe my hair looks unkempt, or whatever. I'd kept my cool for ages for the sake of my father, since he's always been a great dad, and he finally seems to be happy since his divorce, so I didn't want to ruin that for him. But it all came to a head last Friday, when I threw a surprise birthday party for Clara and she ruined it for all of us. My dad had been dropping hints for almost a month that he wanted to do something special for Clara's birthday, and eventually I agreed to organize it for her. I didn't want to do it, but my dad seemed pretty insistent, so I did what he asked of me. I would have expected Clara to be grateful for it, but that's obviously too much. My dad had said that he'd pay for the expenses and wanted me to pull out all the stops for her. It was her 50th birthday and he wanted her to feel really special, so I obliged. I made sure that I booked her favorite restaurant, which happened to be really expensive as well, and made all the arrangements for the food and drinks that were going to be served as well as the decoration. I invited all her friends and family and made sure that people coming from out of town also had a place to stay. Now, the cost of all of that was going to be as extravagant as the reputation of the restaurant itself. So I'd paid half of the amount out of my own pocket in advance, and my dad was going to pay the rest of it after the party. He was also supposed to pay me back the amount that I paid in advance as well. On the day of the party, Clara and my dad arrived half an hour before it was scheduled to begin. My dad brought her in, blindfolded, and she seemed really pleased with the way the place had been done up and the menu as well. She immediately turned to my dad and thanked him for the wonderful surprise, but then my dad told her that it was all me, and her expression went from happy to unimpressed really quick. She didn't even bother to thank me after that and immediately started nitpicking everything. I was kind of surprised by the sudden change in her behavior, because I'd truly expected that at least now she'd appreciate my efforts and try to be a little nicer to me, but was let down once again. I let it slide again because my dad had mouthed sorry to me, and I decided not to make a scene on her birthday, once again just for the sake of my dad's happiness. Then the guests started pouring in, and I found an excuse to avoid my stepmom because I had to attend to my side of the family. But while I was talking to my aunt, Clara and my dad joined the conversation, and she started speaking over me. Once again, she started talking about her kids and how good they were doing in their lives. I almost rolled my eyes because of how boring it was, but then she started finding faults in the arrangements right in front of my aunt, who was supposed to be a guest, which was really just so stupid and uncouth. Then she turned on me and called me incompetent, saying that this party was enough reason for me to start looking for alternatives, and started laughing as if she'd cracked a hilarious joke. She then said I should call myself an event disorganizer, since that's more appropriate, and continued to laugh at her own ridiculous jokes. I'm bloody good at my job, and not a single one of my clients has ever had a complaint with events that I've organized for them. I earn quite well from my business as well. I'll admit that maybe I don't earn as well as a doctor would, but I don't care. I'm happy with what I do, and I'm happy with my life, and I was sick of being compared to irrelevant people all the time, especially when I'm almost 30. I'm not some school kid who's going to feel bad about being compared to other kids. I'm just going to get pissed off, because I've chosen my career myself, and I'm very happy with my choices. I don't need someone like her or anyone else to validate my life choices for me. Coming back to what happened after Clara's comments, I could see that my aunt was also getting uncomfortable, and I expected my dad to intervene and say something to change the topic, but instead, he just laughed along. When I saw him laughing, that's when I snapped. I couldn't believe that despite everything I'd done, there was just no gratitude. I didn't expect it from Clara anyway, but not even my dad. I'd done all of this for him, not Clara. And I'd even ignored all of her mean comments for a year, not just that day. For his sake. And he was just going to take that for granted? So I told Clara that if she couldn't be grateful for what I'd done, then she could leave the party and throw her own. Or better yet, I'd leave and let her handle this the next time. I turned around and left without a word after saying that, and drove straight back home. I was seething thinking about the way my dad had just been laughing along with his wife's insensitive jokes, instead of defending his own daughter. It just wasn't okay, and it absolutely was not fair. I called my brother up and ranted to him about what had happened for 1 hour straight afterward. He'd decided to skip the party, in spite of me and my dad both insisting that he attend. My dad wanted him to attend because he wanted to show the world that he was a family man, probably. But I wanted him to attend so that I wouldn't end up feeling alone at the party. He just didn't want to waste his weekend attending Clara's birthday party, and had even asked me not to attend, but unfortunately I didn't listen. After I was done ranting, my brother told me that it was about time that my dad decided what his priorities were. He could either continue to put Clara first, or he could choose his kids, the family he already had. Clara was clearly in the wrong here, and even apart from that day's incident, she's always been awful to us for no apparent reason. If Dad really wants to show the world that his family comes first for him, then he should start acting like it as well instead of constantly sucking up to his wife. But I learnt the reason for that as well recently. So I'd decided to cut ties with my dad if Clara didn't apologize, and had even decided to call him and confront him the day after the party. But before I could do that, he called me the very same night, and he was totally panic-stricken. He told me that I had to apologize to Clara as soon as I could and calm her down, or else he'd be in big trouble. I had no idea what he was talking about, but I was sure that no matter what, I wasn't going to apologize to Clara. She didn't deserve my apology at all. My dad told me that she was very upset with my behavior and didn't approve of the way I'd just walked out on her. She believed that I'd ruined the energy of the evening with my negativity and wanted me to apologize to her for how I'd behaved. Clara believed it was an overreaction, since she'd just been joking even though there was nothing remotely funny about what she'd said. I obviously said no. I wasn't going to apologize to her under any circumstances, but that seemed to aggravate my dad even more, and he told me that I had to, no matter what. When I asked him why, he refused to tell me and told me to just trust him on this one, but I was done trusting him, so I told him that he absolutely had to tell me the reason this time, or else I wasn't going to apologize. I wasn't going to apologize anyway, but I just wanted to know the reason behind my dad's strange behavior and his incessant need to appease Clara. So he finally confessed to me that it was Clara's kids who had been paying for their lifestyle for the past year, which is why he needed to keep Clara happy. This was the reason he'd forced me and my brother to stay silent, even though Clara would constantly belittle us, be it in private or in public. I was shocked to find out that my dad had fallen so low and was now relying on his wife's kids to pay for the lifestyle he couldn't afford. It all finally added up, all of a sudden. My dad's business hadn't been doing well for a couple of years, but he was still spending money like he was a billionaire or something. We'd all assumed that his business had probably started doing better, but I guess not. I was very disappointed and didn't want to speak to my dad at all, so I hung up while he was still talking and begging me to apologize to Clara. I felt sorry for my dad, but I mostly felt sorry for myself, because this was my father falling from grace, and that realization was breaking my heart. I switched my phone off and went to sleep because I didn't want to talk to anyone at that point. Surprisingly, the next morning when I checked my messages, I also noticed that Clara had sent me a really long text where she was actually apologizing to me. I wasn't expecting that at all, at least not after what my dad had told me the night before, since I expected her to use her kids as leverage and make my dad force me to apologize to her so she'd ask her kids to foot the bill for the party. But now, she was apologizing to me for calling me names and making me feel small. She still maintained that it was all meant to be a joke, but apologized for offending me. I was confused for the most part, but it finally made sense when I read that she and my dad now expected me to pay for the party, since the bill was way too much for them and her kids had refused to pay. So now, they were counting on me to pay. Clara and my dad wanted me to pay for a party that I didn't even get to enjoy, just because Clara's so-called rich and noble kids had refused to pay for their party. They'd even sent me the amount that was still due, and it's a lot. I had paid half of it in advance since I'd believed that my dad would pay me back eventually, but now that I knew it wasn't going to happen, there was no way I was paying off the entire amount for a party for Clara, of all people. It's been 2 days since then, and I've been ignoring their texts and calls because I have no intention of spending any more money on them. I don't know if I'm ever going to get back the money I'd already paid, but I'm sure as hell not losing out on any more. I'm aware of the repercussions of this, and I'm sure that this will be really bad for my dad, but I don't care. What he's been up to has left me disgusted, and I don't want anything to do with him anymore. If Clara's kids and their money are what he's after, then I wish him the very best, and he can continue doing whatever he'd been doing for these past few months to pay for stuff. I've already told the restaurant authorities that they're the ones paying and I have nothing to do with them, so any and all calls will be redirected to them and not me. So, am I the a-hole for not paying for my stepmom's 50th birthday party? Update 1. Okay, so this is just a quick update for everyone who's been asking about how Clara and my dad know each other, or why she had a fallout with my bio mom. So Clara and my mother were friends from college and used to be part of a really fun group, but for some reason towards the end of her time in college, that group began to distance themselves from her, and eventually they stopped talking to her altogether. So the last couple of months in college were really lonely for her, and Clara was her only friend back then. She was never able to figure out why the rest of the group stopped speaking to her, and Clara didn't have any answers either. She only found out the truth a couple of years ago at her reunion, when a friend told her that the real reason the rest of the group distanced themselves from her was that Clara had spread a rumor about her that she'd stolen Clara's crush, despite how hard she'd fallen for this particular guy. The guy in question was my mom's boyfriend in college, who had asked her out and she'd said yes, not knowing that Clara had a massive crush on him, so Clara got mad and went behind her back to spread lies about her and gain sympathy for herself. My mom was very upset, even though it had been ages since she and Clara were still friends. Clara used to visit my mother sometimes as well and would be really nice to her, so this felt like a huge betrayal, and my mom cut her off without an explanation after that day. Clara thinks that she'd overreacted since this had happened way back in college, and my mom should have been over it by now, but I don't agree. Yeah, it had been a while since college ended, but Clara did have the option to come clean to my mother about what she'd done back then, but she didn't, and hid it from her for years. The longer she hid that, the bigger the betrayal felt, and my opinion might seem a little biased, but I think Mom was right to cut her off, and personally, Clara doesn't deserve either my dad or my mother. Anyway, my dad knows Clara through a friend of his. My parents got divorced when I was 10 years old, and my dad only met Clara a few years ago. There's been no overlap like some of you guys have been suggesting. My mother had told me to warn him against her when they announced their engagement, which I had. But my dad didn't care and went ahead and married her anyway. I didn't want to get caught up in their drama either, so I stayed out of it, but I guess I should have pushed him harder and maybe Clara wouldn't have been in our lives now. Also, yes, Clara's kids were present at the party and seemed to be enjoying it as well. I don't know what led to the sudden change of heart for them. I know they're very well off and can afford to pay for a party like that, but I don't know why they're choosing not to. Maybe they've finally realized that if they continue to pay for Clara and my dad's extravagant lifestyle, then they'll just continue to mooch off of them to show off for the world, and they just don't want to encourage leeches anymore. I might be wrong, but I don't know them personally, so I can't say what their reasons are. I think they're just sick of paying for Clara's lifestyle and want her to tone it down, but again, that's just what I think. As for Clara's ex, their dad, he'd never been in the picture at all, and she'd been a single mother, so I guess that's the reason why they'd been funding her lifestyle in the first place. Maybe they were also trying to be good kids like me. But all of us picked the same time to realize that our parents were awful, and that's what landed us in this situation. I hope this answers all the questions that you guys have asked. Thanks for the advice and kind messages, you guys, and the hate. The people calling me a doormat and a pushover need to realize that this is my dad who we're talking about. He raised me and he was a really good dad, so it's obviously not easy for me to go against him. And I still feel awful for abandoning him, regardless of the strong front that I'm putting up. Everything isn't just black and white. If some of you guys were in my place, you'd know how difficult it is to cut a parent out of your life, especially when they've been the best damn parent when you did need them. So now that he needs me and not the other way around, I was trying to return the favor, because I'm sure he must have made a lot of sacrifices for me back in the day as well. I was trying to be a good daughter for him, and I tried my very best until I couldn't. So no matter what people call me, I know who I am, and I'm bloody proud of it. Update 2. Hey there. So, I've been really busy with work recently and haven't had the chance to update you guys, but I finally have a day off today. It's been around a week, I think, since the last time I spoke to my dad, and they started calling me relentlessly after that, so I blocked them because I had no intention of paying for the party. The restaurant also called me about the payment that's still due, but I told them that I can't help them out. It's a little worrying, though, for me, since if the payment is really late, then it's going to be bad for my reputation, and they won't be willing to work with me a second time. So maybe I'll have to either pay out of my own pocket, which is going to be a really big blow, or I'll somehow have to convince my dad to pay for the party that he'd wanted to throw in the first place. I don't know how I'm going to manage to do that. I honestly don't even want to talk to either of them, but I know I'll have to do it eventually, and make sure the payment is cleared. I'd asked my brother to speak to my dad about it, and he'd tried to a few days back because the restaurant kept calling me. He told me that Dad wasn't willing to discuss any of this with him and wanted me to talk to him. It's so annoying that I have to go through any of this at all. If he couldn't afford the party, then he shouldn't have hosted it at all. I could have organized a simpler event for him at their house itself. It would have been smaller and cozier, but it would have been just as beautiful and fun. But he didn't want that, and now we're all stuck in this problem. I'm also just so furious with Clara's kids. I know it's none of my business, and it's not actually their fault, but geez, couldn't they have picked a better time to realize that their mother was a gold digger and was using them for their money? This is all just so frustrating to deal with. Update 3. So my dad paid off the bills of the party yesterday and also repaid me the amount that I'd paid. I didn't have to convince him after all. I guess he and Clara managed to convince her kids to pay, so they didn't need my help. I'd unblocked them a few days ago, and my dad had been very apologetic and desperate, but I'd refused and had told him that he had to arrange at least half of the money. As soon as Clara's kids came around, they realized that they didn't need my help with the money, and my dad switched up as well. He told me that he didn't need my help or pity anymore, and said that I'd shown him my true colors by abandoning him when he needed me the most. I think he's forgetting that he's supposed to be my parent and not the other way around. I did whatever I could to be a good daughter, but he took all of it for granted and never once appreciated me for anything. Just like his wife. Clara and I haven't spoken, and I intend on keeping it that way because she really is insufferable, and also encourages my dad's spendthrift behavior. I told my dad that I didn't want anything to do with him beyond this point because he clearly didn't value me in the slightest. I'd put up with his and Clara's behavior for a year, but I couldn't continue pretending that it was all good when it so obviously wasn't. If Clara's kids were ready to pay for their lifestyle, then they were free to continue living beyond their means. But he shouldn't expect the same from me because I'm not in a position where I can financially support them and their habits, and even if I could, I wouldn't. We ended up getting into a really bad argument over the phone when he confronted me, and I decided to be honest with him, so now we're not on talking terms anymore, and I've decided to go no contact with him. I think he's okay with that too. My brother is also on the same page and has decided to go no contact with him as well. Our mom already stopped talking to him as soon as their co-parenting arrangement came to an end, so she's very pleased with this. I'm a little upset that things had to end this way, but at least I don't have to deal with my dad and Clara anymore. Maybe he'll come around someday, or maybe he won't, but for now, this is the best way forward.